Welcome to Anthologic, the TV anthology podcast. I am your host, Mark. Join me and my guests on phase 2 of this project, where we're on a journey to explore the good, the bad, and the odd of TV anthology shows, season by season. Shows with a strong element of horror, science fiction, and mystery suspense drama. Join us as we slip through the cracks of reality to approach the extremes of experience, where we can peruse the stories and art of a sinister fairground of strange and wonderful rides. There is no going back. Don't say you haven't been warned. Welcome to this episode of Anthologic Phase 2, joined by my regular co-hosts, Scott and Stephen from the Real Britannia podcast. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
Right, we are continuing with our Twilight Zone journey. We did 6 last time, the first 6 last time. We're doing the next 6 of Season 1, so episode 7 to 12 of Season 1. These aired from the 13th of November 1959, and bizarrely the last one we're talking about aired on Christmas Day on 1959. And it has a kind, they could have found a ghost one maybe, more like, but however,
no, it does have a Christmassy feel to it.
It does. Yeah. So it kind of works quite well. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first one is The Lonely, written by Rod Serling, with a lot of music from Bernard Herrmann, I have to say. Really, really cool. Directed by Jack Smite. Right, guys, thoughts on this one? Stephen, let's start you off. What do you think of this one?
Well, I think it's timely at the moment with AI and all this kind of stuff. It kind of brings a renewed dimension to it, to a modern audience, to be honest, because the idea of artificial companions, however you might want to interpret that, is currently the zeitgeist, really. So this, in that context, was interesting to see, but also the age-old story about somebody stranded on their own, whether that's Robinson Crusoe or Tom Cruise and a basketball. There's
Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks, yeah, Tom Hanks,
and a volleyball.
It's maybe just wishful thinking about Tom Cruise being stranded, but there's that element of that, as I say, loneliness and being stranded. In this case, not being stranded by the elements, but deliberately being placed on his own, and how people deal with that. Obviously, a contrast to the following episode, but in this one, I think it's well performed and quite well contained as a story. The denouement, I'm not sure I was completely happy with, but certainly where it was leading as a story and the way it actually places it in that context of the future and how penal procedures with regards to punishment and etc. are dealt with is also a factor of sci-fi and wondering about how crime and punishment would work in theory more evolved situations. So there's a number of elements to this to be going over, and I do, as I said, it's interesting in the context of artificial intelligence as well, and artificial people.
Yeah, I realise I should really give a bit of a plot synopsis before we start talking, really. But my bad. This is indeed, as you said, a man stranded because he committed a murder or possibly manslaughter. It's kind of it's discussed like he wasn't entirely responsible, but he was convicted, and he's been isolated on an asteroid. And the guy that visits him once every 3 months, Allenby, and the next visit, they've only got like 15 minutes just to change the place. And he's desperate for company. He's begging them, a hand of cards, anything. But this Allenby's clearly taken pity on him and he's left him a crate that he doesn't reveal to the other two men who are there to deliver stuff, and they cannot stay. And it turns out the crate has got a female looking robot in it who acts female, and for a companionship for Corey. And then the story is the outcome of that. I'll fill in the story as we go, or if it arises naturally in conversation, we'll do it that way. Right. So, Scott, what's your feeling about this one?
It's a great opener to this batch of 6, knowing what is coming up in a future episode, because we know there is a real classic episode coming up in this batch. And this, I think, is not up with the episode we're going to talk about, but it's a great one to start with, because as Stephen mentioned, there's this wonderful contemporary discussion about AI and AI companions that Sterling could not have anticipated in quite the form we're going to get today. So it's quite relevant. But what I think was the most interesting choice was that Serling makes the character of Corey a convicted murderer, or whatever he may be. He's not an innocent man who's wrongly imprisoned. So it sort of makes the story slightly uncomfortable, because you're asked to sympathise with somebody who probably doesn't really deserve our sympathy. He's being punished for something he did. But how cruel is this solitary confinement on a distant planet? That's extreme. That is really extreme for what he may or may not have done. And
how much resources is it taking as well? Because I've got rocket shit delivering.
Who did he kill, for God's sake?
Yeah.
And is it imprisonment or is it psychological torture at the end of the day? Why is he there on his own in the middle of nowhere on this planet? So that begs a few questions. Lovely to see Gene Marsh in a very early role for Gene Marsh, pre-Doctor Who, pre-upstairs, downstairs, pre-everything. And and as Stephen said, the ending, uncomfortable, very uncomfortable, very cruel. There's a lot of cruelty running through these 6 episodes as well. A lot of judgment, a lot of a lot of sort of like psychological torture going through as well. There's a bit of a theme, but yes. Yeah, it wasn't. I enjoyed the ending, but it was very harsh. Put it that way.
It's more difficult for you, Scott, because I know we've had this discussion before about that you shouldn't empathise with murderers, but but yes, there's a solitary confinement in the conventional sense is considered to be an extreme punishment. So is this better or worse than the traditional solitary confinement? That's the query really, and trying to work that one out with cruelty levels.
Yeah. I have to also say I quite liked this episode, and at the ending, I thought something else was going to happen. Would have actually been even sadder, but would have suited the episode better. When I first watched it, I was expecting a certain ending that didn't happen, actually, which I'll come to when we talk more about the ending. But just want to talk about the actors for a while. Jack Warden, really solid. He must have looked about 40 when he was 12. He's just got one of those old faces.
Gene
right?
Hackman syndrome, yeah.
Yeah, he just looks old, even when he was young.
Peter Vaughan as well is one of those that was born at the age of 55. Yeah,
yeah, he just looks like that guy. Gene Marsh, great in a small role. Not much. Not many lines. She's very good, very striking. She's always good though, isn't she, Jane Marsh? She's always great. I also had a bit of chuckle with Ted Knight as Adams, the trash talking other guy that keeps sort of pulling Corey's chain for no reason other than he's a dick, right? I just want to say,
technical terms.
I'm only familiar, really. I mean, Ted Knight was famous for Mary Tyler Moore and things like that, right? However, I really know him as the judge from Caddyshack. That's how I know him best.
Yes.
And he talks exactly the same way in this. It's kind of funny. And he has got a very expressive face to him, man. And it's funny, he was wearing basically a football helmet. They were wearing what looked like football helmets. I was quite impressed with the rocket ship landing special effect in a show like this. I thought it looked all right.
Yes.
They
Yes.
use it made me laugh at how far away is that rocket, right? They have to walk miles and they've only got 15 minutes. But they tend to park miles away because of the special effect. So yeah. One thing I did read about this specific episode was they had real trouble because they filmed in Death Valley
Mm.
trying to make it look hot, right? The reason is every time you put water on people in Death Valley, it instantly evaporates. So in the end, they were putting like 90% oil, 10% water on people to make them look like they're sweating because it was too hot to use real water. It would just boil
Wow.
off. And
Mm.
apparently, a lot of the crew were passing out. And basically, they had one day that the cooks decided to do quite a heavy, big lunch, and like half the crew passed out after eating that. And they, I think one of the photographers said. One of the cameramen said they put a thermometer right by where Gene Marsh had to lie still, and
Mm.
it got to 140 degrees.
Yeah.
And I imagine Gene
Was
Marsh
that
might
because
have
of her or because of?
well, I imagine she must have got sunburnt in about 10 minutes in a climate
Yeah.
like this, right? But they wrapped it after a few days and just went to inside shots. They decided to film most of it, in a studio to avoid all this. But yeah. Yeah, it's a brutal ending. Right, let's get to the ending. It's a brutal ending. Just telling him he can't take her, and he's like, but basically, there's this turmoil of he gets this female robot. He rejects her completely at first, but then almost immediately seems to come around, and they have a relationship, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other guys don't know about this, do they? When it comes and says, "You've been reprieved. You can come, but we've only got 15 pounds of space." And he goes, "Well, when me and Alicia get on, we don't need much." And he goes, "No, oh, no, 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 no. There's 15 pounds of you and your stuff. You're going to have to leave her here." And he's like, "I can't do that." This could have gone a
But he
number of
does.
ways. Yeah, this could have gone a number of ways. He could have just elected to stay, right? Which was a distinct possibility. But Allaby just shooting her in the face. That's a
Yeah.
bit strong, isn't it? That is a
That
bit.
that opens a lot of questions as to why he's done it. It's not necessarily, because it's a robot at the end of the day. It's
Yeah.
non-sentient. So they could have just left Gene Marsh there to, for a battery to run out or whatever may have happened. So why is he doing it? Is he doing it out of spite? Is he just destroying company property? Is he destroying something that Corey actually loves? Is it to
Or is
save
he save?
Corey?
Or is it to save his own? Because he shouldn't have delivered such a thing to that place, and
There's
he'd get
that.
into
Yeah.
trouble.
Oh,
Right?
do you reckon?
It,
Oh, was
yeah.
that?
He could be covering his tracks there. He could be making it easier for Corey to, because if she's not there and there is no Alicia there, and there's obviously no going back or whatever, then his only choice is to leave, and it takes the choice out of his hands there. But yes, it could be that it was. But I was surprised that it was there was awareness, and he wasn't trying to get him to hide Alicia away from the others as well. That was an aspect. But then again, yes, shooting her in the face, there's probably ways of going about things in a different way if she was going to be shut down or anything. But would it have been cruel if she had just been left switched on and left on her own, and therefore she was then carrying on the punishment that Corey had done without actually committing a crime? And can android robots, whatever artificial intelligence, can they be in that situation where they would feel that in the same way? So
But
that opens a different aspect of the
that's the
whole
big question.
questioning.
Yeah, that's the big. Is she actually conscious or just really sophisticated programming? We could go down that road.
Do androids dream of electric sheep?
There you go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the turning point of Corey changing how he felt about it was when she cries, right? That kind of made him sort of change his mind. That what you just said was the ending I was expecting. I was alluding to of being even stronger, even more cruel, leaving the robot there and it just being lonely, which is then a callback to the title. The lonely is the
Yeah.
robot, not Corey. However, we don't see it that way. And I was wondering, even to the end, I was thinking, is this robot just going to get up and start functioning? after they leave. But that didn't happen, did it? But that would have been a better ending, in my opinion.
Yeah, I
If
agree.
she'd been
Yeah.
left, and more of a gut punch. But here's the surprise: to see, just gets shot in the face.
I think with modern sensibilities, where we are, however actively or inactively, passively, there is the conversation swirling around us with regards to consciousness and artificial beings and stuff. But there's been so much in the meantime between this and now with regards to film and television and literature, examining that topic, that we probably are default to actually questioning that and looking at an alternative ending, which I do think yours is better. But that might not have occurred because they couldn't imagine that the things could reach that level of sophistication maybe in reality, and therefore the consciousness question would exist. So I think we're spoilt a little bit with the passage of time, that looking back on this episode, thinking about how it could have been done differently rather than at the time. This was innovative. I know that obviously there's been stuff preceding it, but not really questioning that element as much so in the mainstream. So I think we have the luxury on Rod Serling.
I also think, was there an element of actually showing the audience it was definitely a robot? There might have been some element of that.
If you look back,
yes, yeah.
If you look back, Serling doesn't spend too much time explaining the technology. Alicia simply exists, and the hardware, the science fiction hardware here isn't the important thing. The important thing is how quickly the human mind, Corey himself, can accept that companionship.
Which we see now,
Yeah.
don't we? Which we see now. And we've seen for years. I used to work in AI a long, long time ago. And even back then, it was amazing how people were bonding. There was a certain program, I can't remember its name, but basically it was based on a certain psychological approach to counseling, where it would just kind of throw back things to you. What do you think? Kind of things. And people who use this to try and get advice are really bonded to it and really wasn't happy if it was going to be turned off. And it was kind of weird, and that was the 90s. We're talking the 90s there, and it was like, whoa. And this is a rich theme in science fiction and sort of speculative fiction, isn't it? This idea of robot companions and bonding to them, and we see it all. I remember a show back in the 70s for kids called Robert's Robots, and all these robots, and all and all that. But then there's all these, Prometheus is a robot. There's many films with lots of TV shows movies where a robot is sometimes the plot or sometimes just a side plot, but it's and this precedes all of that.
Yeah.
What we had before, I guess, was the Frankensteinian thing, creating something artificial.
Yes.
Living. But this is specifically a robot. We're getting into the 50s, and 60s now. This is specifically a robot. In literature, we got Asimov stuff and all that, this, that, and the other. It's interesting. In many ways, I think it's fortunate that it is quite an ambiguous set of actions at the end, because it leaves it more open to discussion. Why did Allenby do this? Did he know that he couldn't leave? It might have been, if you leave robots alone, they start to evolve. It could have been all sorts of reasons, but we don't know any of that. And, we could impose our own thoughts on it. Right? So,
surely there's no fear that artificial intelligence is going to get beyond our control and be an ill. But you're right that the good thing about the ending is it opens questions. So that is
I felt that Corey's reaction didn't feel entirely genuine. If he really loved this being, her being shot in the face wouldn't just be, oh well.
Well, that was my biggest my biggest bugbear with it. That he very quickly seemed to just. I completely appreciate being in shock. Completely appreciate that part of him at some level must have gone, I've got 10 minutes to escape, 50 years but I mean, on the other side of things, they've come to deliver this news that there's been not a repeal of his sentence, but certainly there would be no longer that punishment been, and he's going back to conventional punishment. So, but it should be shock. On the other side, would he have decided to stick with what he's got because that was preferable to being on his own in imprisonment in conventional sense? It's that opens the question as well, but that wasn't examined at the end there, as far as him trying to bargain to do that as an alternative to being taken back. But they've arrived to take him back, saying he's got X number of minutes to get going, and the question is, well, can't you just come back in whatever 3 months like you usually do and collect me then instead?
And take us both back, but then Allenby might get into trouble, or it might be
that element you raised,
there's all sorts of possibilities in there, so interesting. It's kind of almost more interesting in the possibilities that we've just been discussing than the actual story precipitates, which is fairly abrupt. And the reaction is a bit of a non-reaction. But like you say, it could be shocked. But I think a line like, I just forgot she was a robot. Something like that. So, it would have helped a little. It's good to see Jack Walden now. Really, really.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Excellent performance as usual from him. Yeah.
Of course, G. Marsh. That's right. Right, let's get on to our next one, which is possibly the best loved Twilight Zone episode of all time. It's arguable, but it's really well regarded.
It's a defining episode, I think. This one definitely.
This is Time Enough at Last, directed by John Brahm, who he went on to direct the most episodes of the Twilight Zone. I think 12. I could be getting him mixed up with another director, but this particular episode is Burgess Meredith's show, right? Burgess Meredith is delivering here. He was famous at this time for a really iconic performance of Mice of Men, the movie. And in fact, that gets referenced by Serling, doesn't he? He says, of Mice, he does say it in his, I think, over opening or closing words, he uses that phrase, which I think is just a bit of an Easter egg, really. Written by Rod Serling, but based on a story written by Lynn Venable called Time Enough at Last, same name. Not many actors in this, doesn't need to be, but basically Burgess Meredith has really thick glasses, like the bottom of a Coke bottle glasses, and he loves reading, and he's an introvert. You could say he just loves delving into a book and read. He reads anything. It's not just books, is it? He reads sort of packages and notice boards and all sorts. He just loves to read. And it opens, he's a bank teller, and it opens with him reading David Copperfield while he's serving at a counter. He's providing service at a counter. He's just reading it under the desk. And this woman comes up, and there's a wonderful little line in here, and I can't remember exactly, but it's something along the line. Have you ever read David Copperfield? It's wonderful. There's this person, and there's this really horrible person called Mr. Murdhouse. Isn't that a horrible name, Murdhouse? The woman says, "You shortchanged me $1." He goes, "Oh, sorry, Mrs. Carter." A lovely touch. And then it goes on. So the story is, he's a bookworm. He seems blighted at every turn by his boss and his wife to try and just sit and read. And he often creeps down to the vault where it's lonely and quiet, where he can just sit and have his lunch and read and read and read. But while he's doing this, he actually opens up a newspaper. He looks at the front page of a newspaper and he says, "End of world nigh," or something like that, some massive warning. And he starts reading, and he's kind of just sitting there eating his lunch, and suddenly the entire structure rocks. It's kind of cool how they did this, because you see the book page flip and things fall over, and he's trying to, then he realized basically there's been a nuclear war, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when he goes outside, he realizes he's the last left. He tries to find people, can't find him. in the end, he thinks about committing suicide, which is quite unusual, given this is a 50s TV show. But they do it sort of subtly, I'm not sure. But then he finds a library and he's in heaven there. We'll talk about the end a bit more as we go through it. But so, Scott, okay,
Yeah.
how are we going to review this classic then?
This one is so recognizable. I think if you were to mention Twilight Zone to people, this episode is probably the one that they know.
Yeah.
And I think it's difficult to imagine anyone encountering this cold now. And, we always say we're so jealous for people that haven't seen certain movies for the first time. And I can imagine that this one would be a great introductory one to show to people. But then again, it's like, oh, but this is the pinnacle almost. Don't show them the best one just yet.
Yeah. Wait for it.
Yeah, the thing that really strikes me on this, it's vicious, this one. The cruelty is quite interesting because Burgess Meredith's character, is it Henry, isn't it? It's Henry
Henry
Bean.
Bemis.
Yeah. He's not your conventional Twilight Zone sinner. Because he's not greedy, he's not cruel, he's not attempted to manipulate or con anybody. He just likes reading. There's no, and
no one will let him be, right? No one will leave him in peace.
But then you then question, does he deserve his fate? I mean, I'm not going to mention the ending quite well. You haven't mentioned the ending, have you, just yet? But
no, not quite.
But you sort of question yourself, does he deserve his fate at the end? And I think in a way he does, because Henry isn't completely innocent throughout this. I mean, I've seen this a good half a dozen times, and I sat and watched this in a little bit more sort of detail the other night because I knew we were going to be talking about it. You've got an argument here, right? Henry uses books to withdraw from life, right? So he's reading, like you said, Mark, while he's serving the customers. He avoids engaging in his marriage, and we'll have to talk about his wife as well because she is spectacularly cruel in this. He hides inside books, basically. He shuts himself away. So is this episode about condemning people that read, or is it a warning against retreating into fantasy? But then when you look at the people around him, you can't blame him.
No,
when you look at his wife, you look at his bank manager, you look at all these, customer and all that, they're terrible to him, exactly. And you can't really blame him for hiding in this fantasy world. But yes, there's some horrible people in this. The Twilight Zone, what we've learned, I mean, we watched 6 in great detail. We've watched this 6 in great detail, and all three of us have seen dozens and dozens of other episodes. What we realise is that the Twilight Zone works as a kind of morality tale. Not, like the Tales of Unexpected has the twist and all this. Like, these have more sort of morality tales because if you've got a flaw in a character, they end up with some usually sort of supernatural punishment. This one doesn't. What it does, it gives Henry everything he's always desired and then takes away the one thing that he needs to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And what is that? Is that justice? Is it bad luck? Who knows? How would you interpret this? But one thing I'm sure of, Burgess Meredith is superb in this, and this is an absolute classic and deservedly so, this episode.
Yeah, indeed. Burgess Meredith has said, of everything I've done on TV, this is the one that gets mentioned the most. He goes, a month doesn't pass without someone.
It's so memorable.
And this is decades after the episode we're talking. So So Stephen, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not going to attempt to try and improve upon what Scott's just said, because I agree with what he's said. I'm also not going to try and, for every episode we're doing, try to bring something into a modern context with the zeitgeist. But in this case, I do think there is a nod towards feeling that certainly now, and which I think is more extreme than it was back then, a kind of anti-intellectualism, which I think pervades a bit now, more than it did back then, with regards to reading being looked down upon and people wanting to just have some seclusion and have some time with themselves. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. Might be a lack of understanding back then with regards to, like you said, he's an introvert and therefore that's his thing. It is particularly cruel to him all along, and I think he's got plenty of reason not to be around, particularly his wife, but also other people. And ironically, the fantasy world is getting involved with, in the lives of people and empathizing with fictional characters. So there's a tie to that. The opposite of what was going on before, where that somebody wanted to be on their own in this episode, as opposed to before didn't intend to be on their own. But this episode, absolutely, it's very difficult to argue against this being the best, or certainly the most famous episode. There's others that people might have more affection for just because of how many times they've seen it or certain elements within it. But this cannot be knocked in anywhere such as that. I do question about this ending is a cruelty, and whether that was something that was deserved or not. Because, like Scott says, normally people are facing some kind of comeuppance, where, and in this scenario, apart from if you want to try and say that his wife got her comeuppance, he doesn't. It's a cruel irony through accident that what he's always wanted, and he's got everything he always wanted, and then it's taken away through a twist of fate, accident, but. Deeply enjoyable, and it always is to watch. I've seen it many times, some as the pair of you, and I was particularly looking forward to watching this one along with one other in this batch.
Yeah, for me, this episode is a very, very, very finely delivered black joke. A really dark joke. That's how I feel about it. And watching it, I was thinking the other characters. Yeah, his boss is a bit annoyed, but I think his boss is justified. Actually,
Yeah, this is
you
what I'm
can't
saying.
be reading a book while you're
Yeah.
working, right? That is not on. I mean, that's fair enough. His wife, however, is just an awful character. However, you could sort of suggest, well, okay, what came first? His neglect of her or her hectoring of him to not waste his time reading? Is her focus on his reading her rage about being left neglected?
Yeah, you don't know. Yeah.
There's some extreme when she goes to the trouble of scribbling out every page in a book for him to find rather than just throwing it away.
But initially, she appears like willing to let him read out aloud, and then she just destroys those pages purely because she knows that he enjoys it. And
Yeah.
it is real sadism. It's almost sadistic. It's horrible.
She's wanted. No, she's married him. She must have known to some extent what he was like before she married him, and therefore she's married him with the idea that she could change him into what she wanted. Maybe because he's a mild-mannered character, and she thought then that's what she could do, which was wrong of her, obviously.
But as Marcus said, has he retreated into books because the woman he married, because she was like that, and he didn't realise when he married her? We don't know the timeline of this, do we?
Vice versa.
Yeah.
But even then, I don't think it's think it's fair to be if you're doing that with somebody. There's to try and draw them out is a better idea rather than destroy what they love to force them to give you attention. And certainly, I think we all would have taken a different response to her behaviour.
Is she a bit too broadly written, guys, though, do you think?
Possibly. I think it had to be... Yeah, it's because of time. If you think about it, a lot is packed into it. A lot.
Yeah.
The second half's more leisurely than the first because he's exploring the new world and thinking about his options, right? Whereas the first part with her, very short scenes, right? She had to come across really hard. And the thing is, it's not like he hates her or wants revenge or anything. He just wants to be left alone.
Yeah.
And there is a streak of anti-intellectualism with it. I think she calls the poems doggerel.
Yeah.
Whereas the boss is just do your work, right?
I think he's more fair, as you said. It's
Yeah,
more fair for him to be going. Don't be reading when you should be working, especially if it causes you to shortchange people in a bank.
Exactly.
I mean, I mean, you
Yes.
can possibly get away with certain things of not doing your job correctly in certain aspects, and okay, it still might be wrong, but to the extent where you're shortchanging somebody of money, that really should be, yeah, taken a bit more seriously.
yeah. I loved near the end though that whole delicious. Oh, this is this year. This is January.
He's
This is
piling them
next
up.
year.
Yeah.
He loves. You can tell. It's like, oh, this is so great. I'm gonna love this.
Yeah.
The other way it could have gone is he could have just let him lit, and then at the end it's like, oh, this is hellish.
Mm.
There's not, the old. We've seen it in Faust. Devil gives you everything you want, and then you hate it, kind of deal, right?
Yeah.
It
Too
could have been
much.
that. Could have gone that way, but I think the twist is excellent, and it is a big dark joke,
Hmm.
in my opinion. Um, yeah, I think they did it really well. I think the outside stuff with the post nuclear. I mean, obviously it's ridiculous. It would be radioactive hell and things like
Yeah.
that. And there's going to be other people about eventually, right? But they only had 20 odd minutes to fit all this in. We see him find all his foodstuffs. We see him going through despair. We've seen this in a few other. I've seen this in a few other Last Man on Earth kind of films
Of
where you
course.
get
Yeah.
this moment of despair. And if you think about it, I Am Legend has elements of this.
Hmm.
And there's an Australia, I think it's Australia or New Zealand film, Quiet Earth, where a man thinks he's the last man on Earth, and he goes through first like joy, setting up his house how he wants it, and then this mountain despair where he's on the verge of suicide before things precipitate. This is kind of like that, right? And
Yeah.
this did it first. This did it
Hmm.
first. Um, so yeah.
It's I think, the first genuinely great Twilight Zone
Yeah,
episode. We,
it's
we,
a
we all agree on that, don't we? I mean, and we're only 8 episodes in now. And
yeah. This was
we've already
terrific.
found the contender for possibly the best episode out of the whole lot.
It's certainly a benchmark for others to try and meet. Certainly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder if this episode alone uh, basically carried the Twilight Zone forward in terms of getting recommissioned and stuff because it's
Mm.
such a good episode. It's like if an executive were to cancel this series after this, what do you expect from series? If you're getting
Yeah.
this, it's
If
kind of.
if if the ending was slightly different, however, we might reimagine it. Do you think this episode would be as well remembered?
Well, it depends what the ending was.
Yeah,
If it was
but I
as
don't
good
think
as
you could
this.
have as strong an ending as this, though. That's the thing. So
Mm.
if it's slightly changed somehow, I don't know. His wife was still alive. She walked around the corner or something.
Yeah, no, this is Roald Dahlish twist,
Mm,
right? It's
yeah,
a
black.
total
Yeah,
Roald
yeah.
Dahlish twist. It may have even inspired Roald Dahl to do his thing. In fact, he was publishing stories before this, right?
Mm,
It may be Serling picked up that cruel twist that makes people chuckle and injected it in himself. It could be. It could be, right? It's very Roald Dahlish, isn't it? This ending.
yeah.
Um, though this is definitely be careful what you wish for kind of story, isn't it?
Mm,
Um, yeah. So I just think everything was perfect, right?
oh,
Burgess
cool.
Meredith
Yeah,
was perfect. The
brilliant.
dialogue was perfect.
Yep.
It looked great. Yeah, it's very, very enjoyable. And it didn't ring entirely false. Sometimes wives can be like that to their husbands and bosses. So it kind of made sense. But again, you got to realize there's always two sides to every story, right? So you never really know how they got to that point in their marriage, right? So, okay, so we all kind of dig this one, right? Any final thoughts on this one, or should we move on?
No, we can't top that. I think we should finish there, mate. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, our next one is Perchance to Dream. This one was actually not written by Rod Serling. This was written by Charles Beaumont. And it was the first of Charles Berman's scripts for Twilight Zone. Charles Berman, very interesting writer. He wrote a lot for Outer Limits too, I believe. And directed by Robert Florey, who, interesting director. I can't remember all of his works. Let me see if I can find something quick. But I know, for example, he directed the first Marx Brothers talkie,
Did he?
Oh,
Coconuts, right? So there is that. And he's done it. I think he did The Illustrated Man.
So we've got a real sort of Hollywood legend here, then almost.
I
You know, a
believe
real
so.
Hollywood veteran.
I
as we
could
say, yeah.
be wrong, but I believe
Okay.
he's got that kind of pedigree.
Mm.
So perchance the dream, Hamlet. So here we get a Shakespeare quote, right?
Yes.
From
Yeah.
Hamlet. And this one's about dreams. Now we've seen a lot of movies and TV shows since about dreams and the nature of dreams. And for that reason, I was wondering, did you find this guy I know that you've got kind of good perception of when it was made and so on. Do you think people would come to this thinking, "Oh, this is a bit old hat. I've seen this before," because they've seen things it inspired, perhaps, right?
It almost comes across as a film noir as well, crossed with this crazy fever dream.
Yes,
It really got that vibe
yeah.
of a film noir.
Which I think is Robert Florey brought that to it.
Yeah.
yeah.
And you've got Richard Conte, who, the legend from The Godfather, as everybody knows him from 20 years later, or sorry, about 15 years later. Not my favourite episode. I'll be quite honest up front with this one. It wasn't my favourite one. But with this one, I think it's the first episode where you realise that the Twilight Zone doesn't need spaceships, aliens, technology, that sort of thing. It goes into somebody's mind, and that is quite capable of providing the Twilight Zone, as it were. You've got to stick with this one. You've really got to focus on this one to keep up with it, because it does go off on a lot of different tangents, and it is very fantastical, almost a bit like Spellbound, the Hitchcock Dali dream sequence, and that.
I was exactly thinking that. It's a very overall performance, but it has to be.
Yeah.
That's the nature of this. This is a man who hasn't slept for days, so you kind of get it. Right? I think Richard Conte's very good in this.
Very good. Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good shout though, Spellbound. It hadn't occurred to me until you said it, and it's like, oh yeah, that is exactly what we're watching.
Yeah, and one thing, there's a theme running through this, what we're on now, the third episode of this sequence.
Yeah.
Excellent, very strong male leads in every single one so far. And I think that continues through the next three as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. I've kind of led the discussion there. Stephen, what were your thoughts on this episode?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't a bad episode, despite, Scott, I think it's fair to say none of us are going to be describing this as the strongest episode in this sequence, because we've just done that one. And, so to follow on, anything that followed on from that the following week was going to be struggling to make a mark and not seem like an also ran. I don't think it's bad. I think obviously well performed, and the way in which it's shot, I think there are actually, as you've already said, the way in which it captures the dream sequence idea and the manicness of being sleep deprived. It's not just the idea of just being tired, because the way it takes over the brain and drives people in that sense, and especially the fear of what happens if you were going to go to sleep. And I think the denouement of this episode saves it and stops it being something to just discard as just another episode that
Yeah.
So I look at that sympathetically in that sense, and the performances are all well done, certainly. But the contrast to what we've had before is very difficult to overcome. But yes, I'm happy with the episode within its context of what it is. it's not a bad episode. It just can't compete with the previous. That's the
Right.
it's life, unfortunately.
Right, I'll describe the episode. Then I've got a few things to say about Charles Beaumont, but I'll describe it very briefly. Essentially, this man goes into a psychiatrist's office and explains he can barely stand. He's really tired, but he's terrified of going to sleep. He has a heart. He also mentions he has a heart condition. He's terrified of going to sleep, and he explains, "I dream like a movie serial. Every time I go to sleep, I dream the next part of a story, right?" And then he explains about there's this long thing of he met this girl who then tempts into this carnival, gets him into a fun house, and then onto a roller coaster, and they're going up and up the roller coaster, and she's laughing, and he knows once he goes down, it may kill him, but then he's woken up. So he knows the next time he falls asleep, he's going to be dreaming about going over the roller coaster and it may kill him. So he's basically a person terrified of going to sleep with a heart condition, right? That's the basic premise. And then we kind of going through that. Charles Beaumont, in real life, right, was terrified of roller coasters. He also did dream in sequences, in that he'd go to sleep, and then when he went next dream, he would then continue. So that was a thing with him. And get this, one time he went with a friend, and the friend describes this. Went with a friend to a fun house, and they were like adults. And he says, "We haven't been in a fun house since we were kids. Let's go in here." And he's like, "Okay." But there was a kid outside taking the tickets, basically picking his nails with a flick knife, right? A switchblade, and gave him a funny look. And as they go through the funhouse, I'm thinking, and Charles Beaumont said to his friend, "That kid could be in here with us." Did you see the look he gave me? And they basically wind themselves up thinking this kid's going to kill them. And they're by the boardwalk, you can hear the sea under the boardwalk. And they said, "He's probably got trapdoors. And how many bodies are falling?" Basically, they're terrifying each other. And when they get outside, the kid's just sitting there picking his nails.
Yeah.
And apparently Charles Beaumont just says to his friend, "Well, it could have happened." And that is kind of, it's quite interesting when you see the elements within this story, right? He's feeding all his own fears into this. So yes. So, and it builds some great direction and great sort of tense scenes throughout. I really like Suzanne, what's her name? Suzanne Lloyd as Maya, the cat lady, or the cat woman.
Yeah.
I wondered if they considered her when they were casting for Catwoman in the Batman series. She must have been a bit of a contender. There's some striking women like this in the Outer Limits too. They have these strange roles and they're just amazing. And Suzanne Lloyd was terrific here. Actually, is that this weird presence that's sort of a temptress, trying to sort of lead him on, kissing him and sort of, but he doesn't know what he's going to do. There is one point where he opens a window, isn't it, and tries to get some air, and the psychiatrist,
and then such stops him, doesn't he?
Yeah, well, I couldn't quite remember this ever. I was thinking that's a foreshadowing now, I think. But yeah, so he starts sort of going through these problems, and essentially, he thinks the psychiatrist. What we see on screen is he sees the psychiatrist. He doesn't think he can help him. He's sort of dismissive afterward. Walks out and he sees the receptionist looks just like Maya.
Yeah.
And then he runs back into the office and jumps through the window. And it's like, whoa. But no, it's a bluff, isn't it? It's a bluff. He's actually been lying on the couch all the time, dreaming all this. So his dream wasn't as he predicted, but it kind of was.
Well, no, not as a spoiler, but it said that as soon as he laid down on the couch, he passed away went to sleep and immediately had a heart attack. So that's the length of the time for that dream and the episode effectively to take place, because he's obviously dreaming about
being
telling
in the psychiatrist's room,
the psychiatrist room, and then therefore telling the psychiatrist about the dreams. So dreams within our dreams, which brings us into Freddy territory and other things. But the levels on that. But yes, he's he basically died at the beginning of the episode, and it's taken us that long to find out. And obviously, whether he's transposing into the dream how she looks, because that's the last woman he sees before he actually gets onto the couch, and therefore, but she's called Maya, and we think they've taken that from the I think it's Hindu, where it's a sort of shape change and illusion god in a way.
Illusion, isn't it? Yeah.
So, but yeah, striking looking woman, as you say, with cat feline features, as we would call it. But yeah, I think and I'm laughing, I shouldn't be, but there's a sad foreshadowing in the fact that Conti did actually die of a heart attack. So that's not really a good foreshadowing of life imitating the art. But yes, this episode, I think it's got good to it, and that twist is in some ways more belying the things that would then come with things like Inside Number 9 and etc., rather than that what you would traditionally expect of some of the anthology programs that have twists, where we've seen varying type of twists within either the Tales of the Unexpected or the Twilight Zone, as we're doing, but this one is a bit more modern in that sense, as far as that twist, where it was it was a dream that has already played out and by the time we start watching, he's basically already dead.
Yeah. It's like Incident. What's it? Owl Creek. That story.
Yes.
Right?
Oh yes.
It's a bit like that. I just liked a lot of the elements in this. The fun house was a great choice for sort of weird stuff to be happening as well. This was the very first episode as well, not written by Rod Serling.
You can see. You can
see.
It's this one's a nightmare. It's not, as I mentioned earlier, a morality tale. This is pure nightmare, and I think this is closer to horror than science fiction as well. This particular episode. Looking back on it now, I think I'm enjoying this more chatting to you than I did when I actually watched it first time.
Yeah, I think this deserves a rewatch.
Yeah.
I think I might go back and rewatch it after this, because there were so many elements I really, really enjoyed. The performance was really good, but just the direction was very solid, and it did conjure up for me a lot of horror films that have come since, specifically horror films, like Freddy. American Wealth in London, Dream Within a Dream.
Oh, yes, definitely. Yes.
Also made me think a little of Inception. And I wondered if Christopher Nolan has seen this and it was something of an influence on that. I don't know. But there were just lots of good elements in this. And when you think about it, the actual sonnet it comes from, the speech it comes from, begins to die to sleep, right? That's how it begins, and talks about sleep of death, right? So that speech actually sort of relates to what's going on in this episode. So I did enjoy this one quite a bit, actually, and we will see much more of Charles Beaumont. I think Charles Beaumont was probably the second most prolific writer on the Twilight Zone after Rod Serling.
I think that might be true. Yeah.
Can you remember? Because I can't remember too many of the future ones we're going to be looking at. Is Beaumont more of this sort of theme, Mark? Is it more sort of
I don't know, because I've
nightmare?
only ever watched the first season and one other episode, so I can't tell you.
It'll
what
be
I can tell you is
interesting to
some of the
see.
names of some of the things he worked on. Let me just have a look. I'm just looking on his wiki. Hold on.
Yeah, because I'm thinking it'd be interesting to see if he goes down this nightmare route rather than what we're learning that Rod Serling particularly writes, or whether he adapts to the Twilight Zone formula. Be
Yeah, I
interesting
don't
as
know,
well.
or it might be he influenced the Twilight Zone
Yeah.
for them.
Mm.
These are some of the episodes he worked on, right? The Howling Man,
Mm.
Static, A Nice Place to Visit, Miniature, Printer's Devil, and Number 12 Looks Just Like You. I don't know any of those episodes, so I
No,
can't.
no, they're not springing to mind. Okay.
But one, he's also written several films, and one that jumps out at me as interesting is The Seven Faces of Dr. Lao, which has got
There's
a
a
strong carnival elements to it.
It's a
And
comedy as well, isn't it?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And The Mask of the Red Death, which is like the best of the
Mhm.
the Corman Poe cycle, in my opinion. That's a great film. So yeah, he's an interesting. I actually ordered some of his. I found a second-hand collection of his short stories. Unfortunately, they're all out of print now. But I did find, and I ordered it today because I want to read some of his short
Mhm.
stories. I think it's going to be really interesting to read. So yeah, okay. Let's. Any final thoughts on this one, or should we just move on?
Let's move on. I need to revisit that one, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Next one is Judgment Night. Now, this is an interesting one. I'll give a very brief overview. A man finds himself on board a ship uh, that's sailing waters. It's a British ship. I think it's meant to be a merchant ship, but it has a few passengers. So it's a cargo ship, but it has a
It,
few
they
passengers.
do say we don't normally have passengers on it
Yes.
as
Mm.
a line. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was part of a convoy crossing from it's coming out of Liverpool going to New York, and it's was part of a convoy to protect it from the wolf, the wolf packs, the U-boats. But it's got separated, so it's sailing alone.
Yeah.
Um, this man, though, is Germanic. Though no one really comments too much on that, given
No.
it's wartime, World War Two. But this man then starts to feel really uncomfortable. He can't remember how he got there. It's almost like, and when the U-boats are discussed, he seems to have quite explicit, detailed knowledge of about how they operate. Right? He says, "Oh no, it won't be this one," and this is but to be killed by people without even seeing it. He goes, "No, no, they will come up and shell us." He knows all this stuff. He remembers he was born in Frankfurt, but he can't remember anything else. It turns out it appears that for example, in his luggage, there's a captain of a U-boat's hat with his name in
Mm.
it. And he's trying to work out, but he seems to know something terrible is going to happen at 1:15 at night. He
Yeah.
kind of knows that. Um, Meanwhile, these sort of British officers and passengers are kind of being as polite as they possibly can to him while he's sweating away. Uh, Interesting one, this. We won't, whoever wants to mention the ending can, but we'll let it come out
I'll
naturally.
tease it if you want. I'll tease
Yeah.
it until we
So
get.
this is the SS Queen of Glasgow. Yes, it's 1942, and this is a wartime. One other thing I will say about it is this picks out one of the themes that I believe Rod Serling and probably most of his generation who fought in World War Two do have um, ongoing issues with that whole experience of never being able to go back home again, right?
Mm.
And guilt, perhaps, right? And also, there's an element of fantasy about bad people should suffer, built within this one. This has got elements of those, particularly that last bit.
It's Dante, mate. It is a
Yes.
depiction of hell because what you get here is no devil with a pitchfork. You're not getting flames and eternal damnation. You're getting repetition for the rest of your days. I mean, I'm not giving the ending away here. I'm just trying to tease it, as I say. And what is happening is Lanza is being forced to witness his crime from the perspective of those that he's killed. And I don't know, is that a Serling idea of justice? It probably is. I think it's very clever. It took me a while to get into this one and to realise exactly who Lansing was. Because at the halfway point, you get this shift to the perspective of the U-boat, and he's there, and it's like, okay, where's this going? And it's very clever. It just becomes a whole episode about punishment, and as I say, it's justice, and it's quite nasty in this way because it is all about reliving the same moment again and again and again.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's about.
Mm.
I did enjoy the performance in this, and some familiar faces cropped up too, which we'll come to. It was kind of interesting to see those. Just want to mention this was the first episode of the run so far that had any form of censorship.
Is
And
it
it's
to
not,
do? Is it to do with
Oh,
so?
commercial
Mm.
though, for commercial
yeah,
reasons.
commercial. Oh, you tell us, Stephen. Tell us. You know the story.
Well, from what I read, and this is purely from reading, the sponsor sold a variety of goods and particularly coffee. So, despite this being a British ship, they are forced to change the script to say about drinking coffee rather than drinking tea, which obviously
Yes, they
would
weren't
be
allowed.
what the British would do. Yes,
Yeah, that's great. We've got Nazis, death,
Yeah,
damnation,
and
eternal
it's the
punishment.
tea.
No,
It's
you
tea.
can't have tea though. No,
no. So
steady
it's
on, chaps. Yeah.
yes, we've got to make sure. Well, no, not steady on, chaps. No, that's the opposite of what they want.
Exactly. Yeah.
No stiff upper lips either. Yes, it's interesting
Wow.
that there is that censorship for commercial reasons, and that is a victim of this kind of thing. Being this era of television making was heavily reliant upon sponsorship in the sense of not just an advert, but the actual whole show being financed by to some extent or heavily financed, which is why you had, we know our friend Adam does the Lux Theatre things, which were heavily sponsored.
Oh yes.
So there's the sponsorship is a lot heavier than just an advert like we have these days, or even a product placement. This is them being able to dictate the script, which thankfully didn't take me out of
No.
the
Well, they
episode. It
show
was just a disappointment.
yeah, that the actual change of words was something like, "I'll bring up tea to the bridge," and I think it's, "I'll bring up a tray to the bridge." So it
Yeah.
wasn't quite as bad as saying coffee, which would have been jarring, definitely. But yeah, okay, we kind of revealed the end, the nature of this, so I'll just go through it. So essentially, it turns out that this ship was indeed attacked by U-boat, machine gunned and sunk, while the captain looked on, ordering it all. And his own lieutenant, played by James Franciscus here.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, when he first popped up, I thought it was actually Richard Chamberlain.
He's a
Honestly, I thought it
very
was,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. But it's James Franciscus saying, can we suffer? Are we damned by doing something like this? Do we live it forever? But the captain, Lancer, just laughs, right?
Yeah.
Just laughs at him, calls him a dreamer and stuff like this. Um, but this man is convinced they will all suffer for their crimes, which to me firmly sets the episode in the it's a supernatural punishment. It's not his guilty conscience doing this. It isn't madness. It's an actual. It appears to be an actual supernatural. One interesting thing is, right near throughout the script, he says, "I know these people." Now he didn't really see them when he was machine gunning them,
No.
so he
No.
must have been just living this over and over and over.
Mm.
So
I
that
think
was
you're
kind of
quite right.
interesting.
It's almost a ghost story, mate, rather than
Yeah,
sci-fi. This one, it's very supernatural, as you say,
In
yeah,
and and I like the fact that by the time Lanza understands what's going on, that's the point when we do as well. We're kept completely in the. It's very clever writing in this one. We're kept completely in the dark until the reveal comes, and he realizes is exactly the point that we realize as well. Exactly what's going on in this story.
yeah, and he just reappears on the deck at like we
Mm,
saw at the beginning, not really knowing where he is. So this is a
yeah.
kind of a Groundhog Day from hell.
well,
Mm.
I was going to say that this could be in a longer episode if they were doing them an hour and etc. It could have been that it was Groundhog Day, but in the difference that he tried to change the outcome and didn't, and that being the ending, because obviously Groundhog Day, no spoilers, but that changes. But the fact that no matter what he did, he couldn't change the fact that he was still condemned. And that being a different kind of punishment entirely, I suppose. If you reliving it, and every single attempt fails, that's an added punishment to you, that your efforts are wasted in that sense. But no, I think the foreshadowing on this and the way that it's handled, yes, the people involved will largely have been involved in the war in one sense or another, Pacific or European, and trying to actually, at a certain stage in history after the war, there was people trying to reconcile what they'd done themselves, and being haunted by those things, but also trying to reconcile the old enemy, seeing them as human beings that might be going through the same thing as well.
Yeah.
So I don't, I think it's difficult to try and place this simply as a viewpoint of German soldiers or military personnel after the effect has been one-dimensional. This is showing that there might have been cruelty, and certainly as the sub-commander, who was without conscience, but things do catch up with people after the acts are done, and that's something maybe is an added element to this, intentional or not.
I think the wartime setting gives this a lot more weight because it's only 14 years after the end of the war. It's so close to the end of the war. And I think choosing to deliberately set this in 1942, 43, whatever it may be, really adds some gravitas to this. And it's because it's quite close to home, as you guys were saying. Yeah.
A great central performance again. All right, a really solid one from this actor who I've not seen in anything else, but he's quite distinctive in this. And it is interesting to see a young Patrick Manee turn up.
I recognised the voice before I recognised the face.
Yeah, because we hear his voice sort of say, "Shut that porthole! You're no lights" or something, right? And I love the aspect of reality in that every time someone comes in, all the lights go out.
For the blackout, yes.
Yeah, for the blackout. That was really cool. That wasn't needed, but it was a good touch.
I was going to point out when we got to the end of our final review, the production quality and the attention to detail on all 6 of these episodes is absolutely superb. They're not skimping on the sets or the locations or anything throughout all 6 of these. It's the money is there on the screen. It's very well observed.
And they integrated some real footage from U-Boat, it looked like to me, throughout. And there was like the dials were in German, you could tell. Right? You could tell.
Can I throw something at both of you? That you're either
the first time.
You're either going to
is it coffee?
No, you're either going to wholeheartedly agree with me and go, "Oh, shut up, Scott, you're being stupid." John Pertwee's Doctor Who episode, "The Carnival of Monsters."
Yeah.
Set on the boat.
Yeah.
And they keep going through a time loop because they're being broadcast through what the Butler saw machine.
Yeah.
And they keep reliving on a boat.
The Loch Ness Monster attacking.
The Loch Ness Monster appear. But like Ian Marter, before he becomes Harry, he's a sailor within this, and he's so trying to be a Patrick Macnee. But it's just that whole thing of this time loop on a boat round about this time, with passengers being served tea and stuff. And go on, tell me to shut up. But that really had strong vibes for me of the Carnival of Monsters from Doctor Who.
Yeah, I see it.
Interesting.
I'm sad enough to know that ship was like 1920s.
I think it's in
40s.
India as well, isn't it, or something? Isn't it? I know, but
Actually,
you know.
1910s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sad enough to know that. But yeah, I can see that.
Thank you.
There's a number of actually, I've even thought of horror films set on ships with a time loop. There's one called Triangle.
Triangle. Watched it again the other
It's
night.
really solid,
Very good film. Yeah.
very, very good horror film that references The Shining somewhat weirdly, even though it's nothing to do with the story. But it's a time loop thing. Something keeps happening.
I think there's a tendency in literature, also film and television, to have time slippage in one form or another on sort of sea out at sea. There's one about the hour, isn't there, that got Kenneth Moore in, where he's should do on the show at some point, about the hour between midnight and one because of the changing time zones and stuff. But I think there's a tendency to use and a trope of using this because of the fact that there's nobody else around, and also there's no landmarks. You've only got the water and the sky, and you are just using your own mechanisms for measuring time. So I think it's a lot easier as a setting to go to actually use time slippage, and there being either a time loop or like I say, a golden hour where things are different or whatever. Because you're traveling, but are you actually getting anywhere, or are you just traveling? Because let's face it, that's why I wouldn't want to do a cruise, because it looks like one day looks like the next, doesn't it, most of the time. So I think there's a tendency with that to be a time slippage, and particularly ocean going has been and I suppose in sci-fi, I suppose space as well, potentially. But
yeah. Well, indeed, this episode did make me think, and I couldn't quite connect it together, but it's about the time looping, I guess, of the X-Files, where Mulder and Scully go and visit an old ship out at sea and somehow get transported back to Nazi Germany ships. And I can't actually remember much about the episode, but I do remember that. Enough to tell you this bit, right? So yes, ships do, and when you get into things like the Bermuda Triangle and
that's even more,
like that, it all gets quite convoluted. So solid episode. A time loop story though, which probably very new when this came. Quite original and striking, but we have seen it over and over again. Since so we're more familiar, we're more accepted. Must have knocked their socks off somewhat, I would imagine, when it first did. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to the next one, which is when the sky was opened. Okay, so this one, right, it's based on a Richard Matheson story, Disappearing Act. Only borrows the sort of main premise of the story. It's otherwise completely different. Rod Serling basically used the premise and ran with it. Essentially, three astronauts, test pilots have crash landed in the desert. No, they have gone into space. And what happens is
no, it's not three. There's only two.
What happens is something weird is happening, like they shouldn't have come back or something, and they start disappearing from the timeline one at a time, in such that as one disappears, the only one that can remember is the one about to disappear. It's kind of an odd sequence, but people are disappearing from the timeline and being a kind of erased from history, including newspapers and things. So this was three actors, but the most notable one's probably Rod Taylor and Jim Hutton, right?
Yeah.
Rod Taylor here, we probably most familiar with from The Time Machine.
Time Machine, The Birds, yeah.
And The Birds, yes, of course. And essentially, these pilots, one's in hospital Or don't they all get into hospital to be checked up and
Initially, yeah, but there's only one that needs to be kept in.
Yes.
This is the most difficult one to explain.
It's very. It's probably best if we just walk through it. One thing I've got to say right at the bat was, as I was watching it, and I looked at Rod Taylor, I thought he looks like Robin Williams. It just struck me.
Yes,
it struck me. He looks like Robin Williams. Facially, he looks like Robin Williams.
He could have played his dad in something.
Yes,
yeah.
yes. Now he's an Australian actor, but he's reasonably convincing as an American in this. And that's fine. Does a good job as well. Again, somewhat overwrought, but that's the nature of the writing in the story. So essentially, 3 of them are horsing about in this hospital. One of them's in the hospital bed, and 2 of them are like pulling his chain, aren't they? Because he's got a broken leg.
Yeah, they're going to ring him from every single bar they go to at midnight. Yeah, and that kind of thing to rub it in that they are out and he isn't.
Yeah, but sorry, I got this wrong, haven't I? One of them, I'll say Robin Williams. Rod Taylor's character goes in and says, "How many of us were on the flight?" And it's like,
2.
And he said, no. And then we get flashbacks of him and the other chap going to a bar because they've been discharged. They've been examined and they're discharged. And they go into a bar and one is talking to a girl. And then they're having a beer, but one drops his beer. And so it smashes on the floor and says, "I feel like I don't belong here." And Rod Taylor, I'm just going to refer to the actors here. If that's all. Rod Taylor's like, "Well, what do you mean?" And he says, "I just got," and he goes to the phone booth. He comes back and says, "My parents say they have no son named Ed, and they think it's a prank, you know." And we kind of see that. And then Rod Taylor's kind of confused, but then when he turns around, his friend's gone, completely gone. And to reinforce that, he looks at the floor. There's no beer stain. There's no spilt beer, nothing, no broken glass, nothing. And then it becomes a frantic trying to explore what's going on. And he gets more and more frantic. It's also, because it's also told in flashback, it's hard to relate this story, isn't it? Essentially, things occur that sort of suggest they're disappearing from Thailand, including not being in the newspaper anymore, the photo changing of them in the newspaper and stuff like that.
That's very Back to the Future, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's disappearances, right? It's a bit... Well, I won't go on, but essentially this continues until the last one disappears, in essence. There were some interesting things in this. The director, who was Douglas Hayes, wanted to do some interesting stuff. Like in the script, Rod Taylor they wanted to make... The scripting suggested that it was abject terror they were facing as they disappeared, but they decided to shake it up a bit and make it more like a moment of elation or enlightenment, which is kind of an interesting approach. It was very blink and you miss it, though, for me, that sort of thing. But I did like the sort of feel of it, but it felt quite lightweight to me, this one. You kind of knew where it was going and it got there. Stephen, what did you think of it?
Yeah, I think that, yes, we can talk about things like Back to the Future. I think there's elements that's particularly the photo. One of the things that strikes me as why this is a better version that it could have been of a similar story is the fact that each of the individuals, the 3 main characters, they know something is wrong before it happens. It could have been a lesser episode if there was just one character seeing the others disappear and then trying to explain that to other people who didn't get on board with it. It's each of the individuals knowing that something's wrong, knowing that they don't exist before they actually disappear, whether that's through speaking to his parents or seeing the photo change. That adds an element to this where there's that terror of knowing you're about to go, rather than it just being that they disappear and there's the one person left. So I think that makes it a lot more successful. But the elements of some, the space travel and you can probably get into some science with regards to the fact that time is different. If you've got a pair of twins and one of them goes into space and the other one comes back, then on a certain level they are different ages because of how time works in a physics thing. But that's why I think it's a good trope and it is often used. Whether it can even be with Planet of the Apes, for example, with going into space and coming back at a different time period. But the dissonance and at this stage in history, them not knowing what impact space travel was going to have on people or upon life and existence and probably timelines. I think it was very forward thinking to be looking at those questions and tapping into something there. So I think this episode does have a better version the way that they've done it than it could be. It could have been quite flat and not really interested.
Yeah, the energy was high throughout, wasn't it? It definitely kept the interest. For me, one of the weaknesses was nothing was explained. What did they do? If there'd have been a line so like how we went through this barrier. I don't know. I don't know what, but something like that might have helped a bit. Or does it matter? I don't know.
I think the lack of explanation makes it a bit stronger.
Oh, okay.
We have no idea what's happened over the past 24 hours. Is it aliens? Is it another dimension? Have they entered the wrong reality? Were they never supposed to return? All these questions that never actually is addressed at all. It refuses to tell us. And the great thing about it is Rod Taylor's performance is excellent because he becomes more and more frantic trying to convince everybody that another man existed. And what I like about this is sort of one of those fundamental things about horror. When somebody's scared, that's an absolutely awful sort of concept when somebody's really frightened. But when you're frightened and nobody believes you as to why you're scared, that's even worse. And having no explanation as to what is going on, and the fear becomes really genuine. And I don't want to know what happened to them. I don't want an explanation.
Because they're just weak and whatever it is, it won't be as good as not knowing. Right?
Yeah, there's no rules to this one at all. There's no rules.
It reminded me a bit of Hitchcock again. Lady Vanishes.
Yeah,
in some respects, right?
The vanishing people thing is something that does, as you say, occurs in other forms, and to use the sci-fi element of why that might happen is an extra extension of it, of a catalyst for why something could be happening. And certainly the four of us on this podcast. There's only three of us now. This as I say, it takes a different a spin on it, but it's not particularly not now. I mean, we've discussed this endlessly whenever we are talking about particularly Twilight Zone or Outer Limits or whatever, whether we are spoiled, and we talk about this with Hitchcock and films as well, whether we are spoiled with the looking at things backwards, and that we've seen things be done and parodied and reworked, and tropes then developing when the first time round they were done was in something like this, and that therefore we need to appreciate, as Mark keeps trying to remind us of what it was like for people seeing this for the first time and what the history of it was. So I do think that they've done this in a better way, and I agree with Scott, to be perfectly honest, Mark. I don't like to, but the question mark over there wasn't a catalyst in the sense of encounter with some alien object, or that they've gone through some mysterious cloud of space gas or something else like that. This being unexplained, and it could be just a consequence of going into space, which hasn't yet happened in reality for human beings at the point of this show. So, and for all that they kept costs tight in some ways, elsewhere they have to spend money, but they couldn't have as much use of space landings and all these kind of things in this, so they had to readjust the story, being that they'd already landed, rather than show anything happening in space and their landing, particularly not the crash landing, because that might have been costly. But I think it works as it is because it's a human story in that sense, the terror of the unknown, terror of you not existing.
It's the most disturbing episode out of these 6, I think, because of that, because something has simply decided that these men don't belong and it's removed them. But we don't know what this thing is.
Yeah.
We don't know the cause of this. There are no rules to this episode at all, which makes it even more frightening, I think.
Yeah, I don't know why. What came to mind for me was the nature of the aliens in or what if they are aliens, whatever they are, in 2001. Doing things to human history and things like that. It just made me think of that. One thing this does reinforce the whole discussion, and we come back to something about how massively influential the Twilight Zone has been, right? We've said, oh yeah, well, I've seen it in this film and this TV show, and this kind of, again, we've seen this kind of dynamic elsewhere, haven't we? So yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
But any other movie would have had an explanation. This one doesn't.
Well, maybe that's why I was thinking the 2001, because that has no explanation either.
That's true. Right? That's true. Watched that so many times and I still do not understand that film.
Yep. Okay, let's get on to the next one. What you need. Now, this one, right, the one we've just discussed aired on the 11th of December. What You Need aired on the 25th of December. And I was wondering, did they deliberate, because they thought, oh, that's quite Christmassy, let's save it for Christmas.
I like to think they did, because I did get a sort of a Christmassy vibe to this, even though there is no mention of Christmas in this whatsoever. It's very, not It's a Wonderful Life, but that sort of fantastical sort of Christmassy element to it, isn't it?
A darker version. What I also like the fact we're reprising the street salesman kind of person.
Yes.
We got a street. They got a briefcase with basically a retractable table built into it, so you can just sort of put it up and start selling things. Right?
Scott's got one of those with podcast equipment in, just so he can do it anywhere he goes.
Yeah, I can believe that. Again. Written by Rod Serling, but based on a short story from someone called Lewis Paget. Apparently, that was an alias for 2 other writers called Henry Kuttner and C.L. Moore, first published in 1945. So Rod Serling redid this. I also believe I know for sure, actually, that story is barely recognisable. Basically, that story is about scientists working out a thing where they can see into the future, see what people need. Nothing like that in this. This is much more super.
It was all to do with some sort of machine, wasn't it? I think that could. I read somewhere it had already been adapted on. I don't know this series, on a TV series called Tales of Tomorrow in 1952.
Now again, I did. That's actually an extra on the Blu-ray box set,
right?
And I watched the first couple of minutes of that. That was again a completely different take. It appeared to be, and I only watched the first few minutes. Well, I had to skip the 2 minutes of sponsorship stuff because it's quite an old series. And that was a shop called What You Need. People would go in it and then get what they needed. So that was again
it's a bit of a reverse of Needful Things, isn't it?
I was going to say, reminded me of Needful Things, right? Yes, a dark, Needful Things being the dark version of the same, right? So this is so they redid it quite rightly because it kind of gets people out and about. It gets them the story in a bar and stuff like that. So basically, there's an old fella who's peddling things. He's got a big suitcase and he goes in the bar and starts asking people if there's anything they need, matches and so on. However, he's much more than that. He can kind of use prescience, or he can kind of size up people and give them what they need. He can kind of look into the future a little, see what's going on. I really like the fact we get introduced to this quite horrible character who I think Rod Serling says he's got a chip on his shoulder the size of the national debt, like one of life's losers, a scumbag type, right? Not someone who needs to step up, just a bad person, right? Sitting in this bar nursing a drink, and he gives the barman a load of barman says, "Do you want another drink?" And he's like, "No, I'm fine." He says, "Well, we're not renting space here, buddy. This is a bar. We sell, you know."
Yeah.
And he's basically he's quite threatening. He's not a nice person, right? But as soon as this old man comes into this bar, he looks at that bloke like he's terrified of him, right? So you know there's something going on. And he goes to this woman and says, and she says, "What do I need?" And he gives a little thing of cleaning fluid. He goes, "That's what you need." He goes, and she's like a bit perplexed, but it's amusing. And then the old man goes up to the bar, and there's a bit of to do. You know, there's a lot of purple prose in this about, he comes in every night. This guy, he tells everyone what they need and all this. And then he mentions, your lefty's in here every night too. So it's like, so you're telling the guy who's in here every night that this guy comes in every night, are you?
Didn't spot that. Well done.
Yeah, and the ball, and this guy's called Lefty. I mean, it's really on the nose, some of this.
Oh, I thought he was a boxer at first until they revealed he was a
Lefty.
pitcher. Yeah,
Pitcher, but threw his shoulder out or something, so he can't pitch anymore. And basically, there's a bit of, well, what do I need then? And he gives him a bus ticket to Scranton, Pennsylvania. And moments later, there's a telephone call for him, and it's an old coach that's invited him to come and coach for a team in Scranton, Pennsylvania. But then he says, I wish I was smart. I need a shave, and I've got this mark on my jacket, which wasn't there. Did you notice? I didn't see a mark on his jacket at all. People saying there's a mark on this jacket. And the woman then comes up and sort of says, I can help you. So they kind of go off as a pair. So, yeah, okay, that's kind of fun. But what I liked was you can't possibly foresee how whatever is given is going to pan out. I really like that element.
Yeah. The thing that got me, he gives the woman this bottle of spot removal liquid or whatever he describes it as.
Yeah.
And she quite willingly just accepts it. She doesn't question why. There's no look of bemusement on her face whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then as the story unfolds, as you say, literally 2 minutes later, it's like, I've got the bottle of this stuff that might be useful.
Well, she doesn't charge. He doesn't charge her, so it's like, okay.
Oh, that's probably why then. Yeah, she just takes it. Yeah,
give you stuff. So this horrible dude says, okay, what do I need? Again, he looks terrified. Good job from this actor, I'd say. The old fella, and he just gives him a pair of scissors, and he's like, a pair of scissors, really? And then he goes back home. He's got the scissors in his pocket, and he goes in the lift, but his scarf has accidentally caught in the lift, and he starts to strangle. Though it's proper acting to make you look like while you're holding the scarf kind of stuff. They didn't do this brilliantly because he was clearly holding onto the stuff, which he could have just literally. It wasn't even tied around his neck. That
wasn't in a knot, was it at all?
No. But he holds the scissors behind him and managed to cut through this. Again, could have turned around and done it much easier. But anyway, so he realizes this guy's onto something. He can see stuff. And he breaks into his apartment. Again, how does he know where he lives? I don't know. He says, come on, I want something. You got a partner now. And he starts saying, I think in terms of luxury, cars and suits and, things like this. And the old fella whose name's Pedot.
Yeah.
Pedot. I'm going to say Pedot. I don't want to pronounce it any different way from that. He just gives him this old fountain pen that leaks, and it's like a leaky pen. And then he notices it drips on the newspaper, and he's like, it's dripped onto the races. And he goes and bets on the horse, and he wins $240. It says. But then the pen stops dripping, so he goes back and then starts giving this old fella, and he's threatening him. He goes, I can break it, I can pull out every bone in your body and all this kind of stuff. No, what a scumbag, right? And Pedro says, Pedot says, I only give people stuff that they need. I
Yeah.
can't give anything else. And he says, show me something else that's needed. Um, Again, they're in the street now, and he's being heavily threatened. Um, but he doesn't say what he needs, but the old fella just looks in his case. But the scumbag follows his gaze, and it's a pair of shoes. And he says, "Okay, pair of shoes. Am I going to walk somewhere? Is that?" And he puts one. He says, "They're a bit tight, and they've got leather soles. They're all slippery." And then Pedot sort of backs away
Yeah.
and said, "I didn't say they were what you need. Those are what I need." But then this guy lurches towards him to give him a beating or something. But a car suddenly comes around the corner and knocks him over, and he can't get out of the way because the shoes are slipping. So then it's like, yep. So those were what I needed is the story. And then it finishes with, his eyes are hit and run. This couple from upstairs, and the man's got unkempt hair, saying, what happened? He says, a hit and run. And he gives the comb, it gives a comb to the man and says, you'll need this free of charge. And he says, why would I need that? And then it turns out they're on the news and he wants to smart himself. Before he gets a news reporter photo of him, he uses the comb to clean it, smarten up his hair. And then he gives that look like, woo, at the comb, right? Yeah, so it's a pretty lightweight one, this. So, Stephen, what did you think?
Well, this is kind of subconsciously, this is ties into something I said earlier on about the fact that some episodes people rate higher because of them having seen it more often or whatever. I mean, in this case, this is one of the earliest episodes of Twilight Zone I recall seeing and have seen, I remember seeing frequently for some reason. So this one I've got probably more affection for. It probably bumps it up its ratings for me compared to somebody else. But I think it's got quality to it. It's certainly the changes that they did compared to the source material is absolutely makes it better, I would argue. I think the performances are strong, even though to some extent the villain of the piece is a caricature. But there's enough in this that I think does make it worthwhile and something I enjoy watching because of that familiarity. But in itself, it's also is a like you've said before with the other episodes. Be careful what you wish for because some people, what they wish for or what they actually turns out what they get isn't always to their benefit. So that's the twist in this in a way. But yes, I've got a history with it in that sense, which I understand logically means that I'm a little bit biased with it. So
It is quite I mean, it's really well shot. It does look good, especially those final scenes out in the street. They look really good, actually. I thought. Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, this unlike Stephen, this was a first time watch for me for this episode, and very very close to being my favourite out of the six. If it
Oh,
wasn't,
great.
yeah, it's one of those wonderful little stories about the danger of receiving too much information about your own future. We see this in other movies and other TV shows. And I think this one's a bit closer than some of the other ones to that traditional Twilight Zone structure that we know that where, bad man discovers a supernatural opportunity, totally abuses it, and then some sort of supernatural justice follows. And I think this one's quite close to that formula, which we sort of lost a bit in a couple of them that we've already talked about. It's a classic, like we said, Serling morality play, this one. Renard doesn't want good fortune. He wants control over the future. He's not just satisfied with winning $240 on a
yeah,
horse. He wants more, and he wants it every day. If you can do it for me today, you can do it for me tomorrow. That's his attitude.
Mm.
And once he's discovered that there's somebody that can help him glimpse into the future, he finds that he can't stop. And there's this thing about wants versus needs, and the title is key to this, which is what you need. Renard confuses the two all the way throughout this. What he wants is money, luck, power, certainty, but ultimately what he needs is something rather different. And it's very clever. It's very charming, despite the fact the scene in the lift, as you said, Mark, is quite obvious where he's holding on to the scarf and things like this. Where you mentioned that the quality of the final scenes, the quality in that that lift scene is very, very well observed. Like I said, the production values throughout all of these six is really, really good. And that lift sequence is quite on the nail. And as I say, it's possibly. I mean, I know you like ranking all of these towards the end, but I'm going to let you into a secret. It's probably my second favourite out of the six. This one.
Fair enough. I still liked it. I mean, I did make fun of the lift thing, but it wasn't well executed. It could have been. It just needed to be tied around his neck rather than just loosely hanging. That was the issue. But otherwise, I thought it was charming. It reminded me somewhat of like One for the Angels, maybe because of the pitching aspect of it. But I kind of like that element of an sort of. Also, I mean, the bad guy got his comeuppance. He totally deserved that. So
that's just classic structure for the Twilight Zone. Yeah,
like I say, morality play. So
yeah,
I sort of liked those elements. Okay, let's talk about the
I was just going to say just a bit of trivia on this. It's a Easter egg thing, which
newspaper.
The names in the newspaper, along with the fact that it does have a headline about the H bomb and which is from the previous episode, but with Meredith Burgess. But yes, the names of that are in the newspaper with the runners and riders is. Including Serling, a number of other production staff for the episode. So sorry, just thought that was a nice, cute little thing in the episode.
Yeah, it's cool. It was cool. Okay, I'm not gonna insist on ranking. Let's just talk about what jumped out at you. Do you mind if I go first on this one?
It's your show, my friend, please.
I liked all of these. I thought they were all really good. The real standout for me was Time Enough at Last. My second favourite was probably The Lonely. I just felt it was really strong. We didn't really talk about this, but the music in that was really strong as well. But there was lots of really good ones. The direction in Perchance to Dream was excellent, for example. And I really like the fact that Charles Beaumont was the writer. It just makes a nice little change. I really like Rod Serling, don't get me wrong, but I think Charles Beaumont was up there. It wasn't like, oh, this isn't as good as usual, was there? It was still very strong. But a little more nightmarish than we're used to. And that was kind of cool. So I haven't got any complaints about any of these six. I like them all.
Yeah.
It's just Time Enough at Last for me was the best and probably will remain the best of any of the ones we watched, I suspect. Having said that, I haven't seen series 2 to 5. So who knows? But I just think Time Enough for Love is just so perfect of an episode. It's really hard to beat. But like I say, I liked them all. Stephen.
Yeah, I certainly would agree that I like them all. Yes, we've got stronger episodes than others, and it's a matter of taste to some extent regarding which ones you might prefer, and I suppose sometimes your mood as well. But there's none of them that are a dud or miss the mark to the extent where you think, oh, that shouldn't have been done. We can have niggles over like The Lonely, whether the ending could have been done slightly different with hindsight that we have, decades and decades later. But there's enough of variety in here that it can hit the mark for different people, I think, and certainly shows the strength of the show, as you've pointed out repeatedly with regards to the context of the time, what had been done before, what we're looking at it through a lens for. The innovation in this, with the variety, as well as the quality, is something that does continue to bode well for after having the first 6 and then having this 6. How could anybody not want to continue watching to see what else is to come? And there's a few that are coming up in the next batch, which I have seen before and remember, and some that I don't remember why I've seen them or not. But certainly, this is as a 6. This is incredibly strong to be putting before anybody, to actually show the value of the Twilight Zone as a show and explain why it was so influential.
Yeah, that's a good summary. Scott.
I think these 6 illustrate just how much territory the Twilight Zone's covered after only 12 episodes. We're only 12 episodes into this now. And there are different themes throughout all of them. The performances are absolutely superb. I sort of highlighted this at the beginning when you've got Burgess Meredith's performance in Time Enough at Last. Rod Taylor's in When the Sky Was Opened was superb. Jack Walden's, as you said, Mark. You can't fault the performances. Richard Conte, all the guys absolutely knock it out of the park. I think Time Enough at Last obviously is iconic, and I pray to God they never remake it. I'm hoping they haven't remade it in any future incarnation of the Twilight Zone or anything else. That needs to be left untouched. I think the Rod Taylor one is more frightening because it leaves you with nothing to hold on to, that episode. That one just is totally to your own devices, that one, how you interpret that one. And of course, as we said right at the beginning, The Lonely is the most relevant one today because the idea of somebody developing like this emotional relationship with an artificial personality, a robot, that was pure science fiction back then. It's not theoretical now, as we know. So yeah, this is why I'm enjoying this series, because as you've both said, decades on, we're still finding stuff that's relevant and stuff that we can talk about today.
Yeah, the actual human drama built into these still rings true somewhat. I know that occasionally a few scenes are a little overwritten, but this is a strong voice, right? Who swings hard, right? So sometimes the swing goes a bit awry. However, it's kind of really, really hard not to like all of this. Frankly, it's just too good. It's just too good. And I'm wondering, to me, The Lonely is the one I remember most after Time Enough at Last. And I remember it's because maybe I haven't seen enough, but I rate that very highly as well. I know the ending doesn't, but I just like the whole vibe of it. And I think Gene Marsh is really strong in it, and it's very iconic looking, and it sounds great, and so on. And their choice of Death Valley is also somewhat iconic as well. However, there's lots of good stuff throughout these 6. Okay, next time we'll be covering another 6 episodes of this. So guys, Scott, do you want to talk about Real Britannia? Have we gone past that point now? You're a host. Or... Mention it briefly. Sorry, I'll put you.
Real Britannia, classic British movies from the silence to the modern age. We cover everything. And Stephen's on it, Mark's on it, Hal's with us now, and Tony has rejoined us. Just find it wherever you download your podcast. It's bloody great.
Yeah, you'll hear all 3 of us on that quite a lot. So yeah, that'd be awesome. Okay, guys, do you want to say your goodbyes and I'll lead us out?
Mark, thanks very much, mate. Been a pleasure.
Yep, thank you very much for this, and see you again.
Yeah, and thanks for coming on, guys. But before I go, may I ask, is anybody out there?